I want to tell you some almost unbelievable developments that are taking place behind the scenes at Fanatec. No crazy editing, no music, no BS, just me and you, because this is one of the most important topics I've ever covered on this channel, if not the single most important. It's an existential issue for the company, and it has huge implications for sim racing as a whole. So, if you are a sim racer, or you're in some way sim racing adjacent, you would know that Fanatec is one of the largest hardware developers for sim racing in the world. You would also know that recently they've had a pretty bad streak of luck with chip shortages, supply issues, logistic issues, customer support issues. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. What if I were to tell you that those surface level issues are just a drop in the bucket compared to what's happening behind the scenes at the executive level? There is a movie-scale drama developing back there, a war seemingly between two parties, one being helmed by the former CEO Thomas Jackermeier and the interests that he represents, and one being helmed by the management and the board as they currently exist. Now, because this is around the point where viewership tends to really drop off on YouTube, I would implore you this. If you don't have time to watch this video, I completely understand. Please pass it along to somebody who might be interested or who is interested in the sim racing space, because this is a really, really important video. And if you do have the time, I would implore you to watch it all the way until the end, because the situation and the story just gets more and more absurd as we go on. But I have to lay the groundwork so we understand and we build up to where we currently find ourselves. So, full disclosure before we get into all of this, you may know me as a sim racer or a sim racing content creator. I am in actuality the CEO of a audio software company called Submission Audio. I'm also a retail investor, and I have been a Fanatec affiliate in the past. I may still be part of that program, even though I largely shut down this channel well over a year ago. Now, about a year after I basically quietly exited this channel, I also became a Fanatec shareholder for the same reason that I was an affiliate. I believe in the company's products, and I believe in the company itself, and I believed in their inevitable bounce back because it seemed self-evident to me, which is why it's so weirdly odd for me to make this video, because the story that I'm about to reveal to you, even though I've gone over it myself several times in crafting this narrative, I almost still don't believe it. Before we move on, I want to thank Renee Selman, who's the one who's done the majority of investigative work here. Please follow him on Twitter for any relevant developments to this story as they come, because I'm sure things will pop up after this video goes live. So let's get into it. During the COVID period, Fanatec, much like my company, were considered one of the COVID winners. Because everybody was locked down and forced to do everything at home, there was an explosion in sim racing, which certainly helped this channel as well. Fanatec, as a result, got a market cap of over 300 million euro at the very peak in 2021. Now, they made a cardinal mistake around this time that many other companies made, like Shopify, in that they projected the good times would never end. This, of course, wasn't the case. They would quickly run into chip supply issues, logistics issues because of the broader spread lockdowns, and they would engage in what appeared to be a wanton spree of mismanagement. They debt-loaded the company, spending money that they functionally didn't have to build a new HQ with a go-kart track on top. They also ran the company unprofitably for a couple of quarters consecutively. Now, from what I understand, this didn't necessarily have to be the case. It's a company that could very easily become profitable or could have been run profitably all the same, because they are one of the largest sim racing developers in the world. It seems almost inconceivable that they would be running at a loss. But all the same, that's what happened, and they ended up with a ton of debt. Now, we move closer to the modern day. Last September 2023, they appoint a new Chief Financial Officer, CFO, Matthias Kosch. Matthias Kosch used to work at a company called Blue Cap AG. This is very, very important, and I want you to hold on to that because we're going to circle back around to it, and it becomes very, very relevant to this story as it develops. We move on to March of this year. They issue an ad hoc statement, a flash press release saying, "Today, the supervisory board of Endor AG, which is essentially the holding company of Fanatec, has decided on the dismissal of CEO Thomas Jackermeier, effective at the end of March 30, 2024, thereby fulfilling a key condition set by the lending banks for the extension of the standstill agreement until June 30, 2024. Now, this was a sign that something was extremely wrong behind the scenes, because it's very unusual for creditors or a bank to demand the removal of a CEO or sitting CEO from a company. They generally just want to have their loans repaid with interest. So they went on to appoint Andreas Ruf as the new CEO later in April, and we got a very worrying ad hoc statement after this. It reads, "The investor process is conducted in an open manner, and the board of directors examines an injection of equity capital through capital increases, as well as investor entry using instruments in accordance with the Act on the Stabilization and Restructuring Framework for Companies, STARUG." Now, this is the key important phrase, STARUG. STARUG is a German legal framework which allows an ailing company to restructure itself while being free of any concerns about being litigated against by its creditors. It means its banks can't sue it, its investors can't sue it, and it basically just has free rein to do some restructuring behind the scenes. Now, the problem with this is that STARUG has been wielded very recently to some unbelievably worrying outcomes by the companies. Take this example from a company called Endor AG. A restructuring plan changed the structure of the company in one fell swoop. Following a radical capital cut and a capital injection of 150 million euros from Stefan Pierer, the Austrian entrepreneur was entered in the commercial register as the new sole owner of Leoni. Pierer had joined Leoni in 2020 and gradually increased his stake in the company to 20%. At his instigation, the ailing automotive supplier took refuge in pre-insolvency restructuring proceedings this year. As a result, the value of Leoni shares was set to zero. Pierer alone subscribed to a capital increase, thus securing all new shares, and is now the sole owner of the company. Now, in case you missed the details there, that is what pure evil looks like. This is unfortunately a reasonably common occurrence of legalized white-collar crime, and this provision, this framework, allows companies in Germany to engage in disappropriating shareholders of shares in a company that they've been investing in for years. This means the very same people that helped build a brand to the position that it is, the same ones propping up its value and keeping it alive, get completely gutted for a new investor to come in and sneak up and grab that company for pennies on the dollar. This is unbelievably unethical behavior, and it's also a massive conflict of interest between a board and their fiduciary duties to their shareholders. So the fact that Germany even allows this is almost inconceivable. But it only gets worse from here. We're just warming up and we're still setting the stage for this story because it just gets so much more wild. So Thomas Jackermeier, the fired ex-CEO of Fanatec, or Endor AG, now issues a press release via a third-party outlet because he's been forbidden from using the company's official channels in order to issue press releases. It reads, "Majority shareholder of Endor AG organizes fresh capital and liquidity for the company." So, in short, Thomas secured a financing package of 25 million euro to finance the company through to the end of 2026, which is great news. It means that they don't need to go through these crazy restructuring processes. Now, the key part. Jackermeier is thus presenting an attractive alternative to the restructuring under the German Corporate Stabilization and Restructuring Act, STARUG, which was previously preferred by parts of the executive board. The concrete danger of expropriating all shareholders through the procedure proposed by the executive board has thus been averted. As in the case of Leoni AG, all small and large shareholders would be expropriated, says Jackermeier. Now we're starting to see the story take shape. It appears that members of the executive board, or the management board, are attempting to lay the groundwork for this STARUG restructuring process, which would disappropriate all of their shareholders from their holdings in the company, whereas Thomas is literally fighting for the survival of his company. He is fighting for the shareholders large and small, the people who helped build Fanatec to where it is since 1997, as well as his own interests and the brand integrity. Because if this went along, this would be a massive cataclysmic fallout to Fanatec's broader image in the sim racing community, even in the corporate community as a whole, because it would be unconscionably unethical. One of the main takeaways from Thomas's post is that the company was actually profitable again in Q1 of this year, which means that the Starrug process is not necessary. It's also worrying that the company didn't announce this in any ad hoc statements. They weren't telling their customers and shareholders, it's okay, we're making money again and it's all good. We're not just running at a loss. Now, this is where the situation gets so much worse. The press release continues. As already known, the current management board has submitted an offer from Birkenstein Capital to the lending banks, after which they would have to waive a significant portion of their loans. The shareholders would lose their shares as a result of the takeover of Endor AG by Birkenstein Capital. So Birkenstein is an investment firm which specializes in these takeovers of companies that are being restructured. So what's essentially being proposed by the board is that while the company, Fanatec or Endor AG, which is currently trading at an immensely depreciated value of 10 million euro, will be bought for pennies on the dollar by this investment firm, all the while the shareholders that help prop up its value and grow the company over the decades would be completely disappropriated from their shares. This would be theft happening in the open. This would be an almost, not only an unconscionable level of conflict of interest, but something that is almost inconceivable being allowed through a legal framework. But here we are all the same. Now, again, we're still just warming up because the story gets so much worse from here. And I'm also going to explain why this is bad for customers shortly. I know that we've largely been talking about, the managing partners, the CEO, the shareholders, but this has a very visceral, tangible effect on what the company is set to be over the coming years, and we'll get to that very soon. Now, here's where it gets crazy. The managing partner of Birkenstein Capital is Tobias Hoffmann-Becking, who, now, bear this in mind, he was the former CEO at Blue Cap AG. Sound familiar? That's the same company that Fanatec/Endor's current CFO brought in to restructure the company used to work for. So the current Fanatec/Endor CFO used to work for the same company that had a CEO who currently works for the company attempting to take over Endor and Fanatec. This is about as clear a conflict of interest as you will ever find in any institution ever. So the narrative as it appears to be taking shape, and again, I'm just saying that this is what it appears to be because the signs are very much pointing in this direction, is that the CFO was brought on board in order to prep the company for this Starrug process to disappropriate shareholders, to make the company look weaker than it actually is, in order to set the stage for this takeover for a investment firm that is helmed by his former CEO. That's what it appears to be. I'm not saying that's what it is, but that's certainly what it looks like. So what this essentially does, keeping the valuation of the company depressed to these levels, it allows Birkenstein Capital to buy Fanatec Endor for pennies on the dollar while disappropriating all the people who had built it to what it was, including the former CEO. Now, this is where the story gets even worse. Believe it or not, we're still just midway through this, where we're just warming up. So, Thomas Jackermeier posts this on a German investment forum. Now, I've spoken to a couple of sources. They have corroborated that this is, in fact, Thomas. I've tried to speak to Thomas himself, but he's been very difficult to get a hold of. But these are very reliable sources, and this appears to be Thomas himself posting on a German forum. So, I'm even assuming that the company or the other side has now commissioned a PR agency and is creating a mood against me and for their people. I would also like to report on the very strong growth in sales in Q1 compared to the previous year. For whatever reason, and contrary to my clear request to do so on an ad hoc basis, this information has not yet been provided. Next, they will no doubt blurt out what I've allegedly done and try to discredit me. That's a popular game in a situation like this. So this is painting a picture of an all-out war at Fanatec between Thomas, standing for the shareholders large and small and for the brand integrity, versus the current management as it stands. He continues in another post. Our main supplier and biggest creditor apart from the banks has promised me full support. He is a German who lives in China and is connected to motorsport. He is fully committed and will immediately return to the old payment terms in the event of a capital increase. The current planning is based on prepayment, which should significantly reduce the cash requirement. In addition, the company has received binding offers from him for an investment of $3 million. But above all, he has announced that in the event of Starrug, he will immediately stop deliveries and only deliver against 100% prepayment. As an entrepreneur, he is appalled by these machinations and also by the legal possibilities that allow shareholders to be expropriated, even though the company is doing well and is profitable. The second largest creditor is also on our side. So it appears that there are still some sane, moral people in Fanatec's corner, or at least in Thomas's corner, looking to safeguard the integrity of the brand, and luckily for us, they appear to be key suppliers of their parts. I'm going to tell you a little story that doesn't really relate to this. It's just my personal experience as a retail investor over the years. When a board of directors erects an opaque screen between themselves and the public, the customers, and the shareholders, and only issue the minimum necessary politically neutral statements to keep everybody at arm's length, in my experience, 90% of the time, the reason for that is that they are looking at all the machinations available to them in order to gut the company, gut the value of the shareholders, and basically secure golden parachute exits for themselves. Now, that's just been my experience with other companies. I'm not saying this in any way relates to Fanatec or the opaque screen that they've erected between themselves, their customers, and their shareholders, and the politically neutral statements and largely lack of communication that they've had over the last several months. That is, of course, a completely different matter. But we're getting near the end of this saga now, and like I told you, like I promised, it just gets more and more absurd. And this, what I'm about to read to you now, is just, it's the coup de grace. It is almost unbelievable. And this is something that Thomas wrote on that same forum. I'm going to read it to you. I was legitimately asked how I was incentivized in the case of Starrug and would like to disclose this. Birkenstein/Davidson Kempner, in case you missed it, that is the investment company looking to take over Endor/Fanatec, wants to keep me loyal to the company even after the expropriation of the shareholders. They therefore made me a very attractive offer just last week. According to their own plans, Birkenstein/Davidson Kempner expect the following result in 2028. The company is to be sold on in 2028 with this exit scenario: a turnover of 280 million euro, EBITDA of 70 million euro, and an equity value of 1.2 billion euro with a debt of zero. The management and I were promised up to 20% sweet equity. My share is supposed to be 10%. Depending on the EBITDA multiple, they calculated for me and the management that these shares would be worth up to 423 million euro in the event of an exit. I have already rejected this very lucrative offer in no uncertain terms. How insane is that? So, in case you're not connecting the broader picture here, what Birkenstein are attempting to do is buy Endor/Fanatec for pennies on the dollar while they're depressed at a valuation of 10 million euro. Mind you, at its peak, Fanatec was generating profits of over 20 million euro, so its current valuation is obscene. They would buy the company at this rate, and in 4 years, they plan to build it up until it has an equity value of 1.2 billion euro, which is orders of magnitude higher than where it currently is. Then, they're offering the management a golden parachute, 20% sweet equity, which totals up to 423 million euros, and all they have to do for this is sell out all of the shareholders that helped make the company what it is over the decades. The narrative that's emerging here is that certain members of the board are very much in favor of this arrangement, whereas Thomas, very much to his credit, I almost can't believe his integrity in this situation because of the amount of money that we're talking about, is looking to save his company, the integrity of his company, Fanatec as we know it today, in order to not absolutely gut the people that got it to where it is. I told you guys that I would relate this back to how it affects you as a customer or a fan of sim racing, because you might be thinking, okay, much of the story has been dealing with investors and shareholders and things that you largely probably won't be interested in. Well, think about this. The company is currently worth an equity value of around 10 million euro. If they plan to raise it to 1.2 billion euro in the space of only 4 years, how do you think they're going to do that? Do you think the products are going to become cheaper? Do you think the products are going to become higher quality? Do you think the scale of the products will be depressed in order to make sure that the quality control is good, or do you think it's going to go in the opposite direction? What do you think will happen to the integrity of the Fanatec brand when an investment firm basically treats it like a house renovation that they plan to flip in 4 years? Do you think that they care about sim racing? Do you think that they care about sim racers? Is the narrative that's emerging here one of people that care about those around them, or people that built a company to where it is? So bear that in mind. Now, we have one development that recently happened just before I shot this video, because people in the German government are becoming aware of what's taking place behind the scenes here at Endor. So the German Protective Association of Investors demands a convening of an annual general meeting of Endor AG. They point to the connection between Endor, Fanatec's current CFO, and the managing director of Birkenstein, the company looking to take over Endor and Fanatec. So they're starting to see this. This isn't just a tenuous thread that a few people on Twitter have put together. The actual authorities are taking note of this. They consider Starrug to be unacceptable under the circumstances because of the board's fiduciary duty to their shareholders, and the fact that Thomas has secured a 25 million liquidity package to the company that will keep it alive through to 2026, and we've already seen that it can start running profitably, as of immediately. Okay, you might just be a sim racer at home, you might be thinking, well, what can I do about this? You might be surprised, you can actually do quite a lot. The first thing you can do is share this video around to all the people that you know might be interested in it, because it's super important that as many people in sim racing find out about this situation before this entire process unfolds. We need to start a ground roots movement so that the people in charge of the company, the people at the investment firm, and the regulators over in Germany become aware of what they're planning here before the company gets essentially gutted. You can share the video, post on Twitter, follow Renee Selman on Twitter for updates, reshare his updates as he posts them, tag in Endor, tag in Fanatec, tag in anybody relevant to this situation. Make it clear that the public won't support a move that's this unbelievably unethical, because there is no way that this can result in a situation that's beneficial to Fanatec fans, customers, just people in sim racing as a whole. This is not a precedent that we want to set in this industry. Above all, voice your support to Thomas, who is fighting tooth and nail to save the company that he established in 1997. Give your support to his capital raise. I'm not saying engage in the capital raise. I'm just saying, if you care to, voice your support for that in favor of gutting the company, and voice your disapproval of this unbelievably unethical Starrug process. I'm going to disappear back into sim racing retirement. I wish you all well. I hope you've been great in the years since I called the curtain down on this channel. And I sincerely hope that sim racing gets the ethical outcome to this situation, because the last thing I would want to see is a company as large as Fanatec get absolutely gutted by people that are simply concerned in their own interests. Hope you guys have a great day.